Scott Bridges there giving the Prime Minister of New Zealand 10 out of 10 for communications over the coronavirus. Simon Bridges, sorry. Scott Bridges is in the news for other reasons I'll come to later. Now, yes, Simon Bridges there giving Jacinda Ardern 10 out of 10. That's quite surprising. Very generous of him. Now, it is sort of Opposition Leader Monday here on the Kenny Report because we're going to Brisbane now to catch up with the LNP leader, the Opposition Leader in Queensland, Deb Frecklington. Thanks for joining us, Deb. I believe kids are back at school online in Queensland today, but the website crashed.
That's absolutely right, and great to be on your show again, Chris. Yeah, what happened here in Queensland today is just been a bit of a debacle, if you put it that way. So some kids are allowed back at school, but only those who are children of essential workers. Look, the LNP have been really clear about this schools problem that we have here in Queensland. We are very pleased that there has been a falling off, if you could say, of infections for coronavirus. And we've said the rule should be if you're a parent and you want to send your child to school, you should be allowed to. And on the same vein as if you want to keep your kids at home, then that should be okay as well. Look, 3 weeks ago, Chris, we had less infections than we have now, and schools were open. So first day back, the website crashes. We've got parents who have struggled to teach their kids at home today, and kids who have struggled to learn because the Queensland Government website crashed.
Yeah, look, I've been pretty hot on this schooling thing around the country. Each state's been slightly different, but the medical advice has always been that kids should be at school, and especially when we see the low number of infections, only 8 right around the whole country today, it does seem ridiculous and counterintuitive that this is at a stage where most of the states are going to an in-home, at-home learning model.
Well, I mean, the point of it is, Chris, we've got other states like I believe it's Northern Territory and South Australia and Tasmania who have actually got their kids back at school. We've got the Prime Minister encouraging people to send their kids back to school. But yet we've got, thankfully, in Queensland, we've had no new coronavirus cases overnight, which is great news. Queenslanders have listened. They have done the right thing. But, Chris, there is no medical advice that the Premier has to say our children shouldn't be at school. So if the Premier has that advice, why doesn't she treat us like grown-ups, give us the advice and we'll look at it? But that's exactly why the LNP and the opposition here in Queensland has been saying our kids deserve to be back at school. And, of course, we're looking out for our teachers and we're looking out for the kids. But we don't want them to miss a year's worth of education. I mean, I've got a child in high school and it's stressful enough. So let's get these kids back to school.
Well, what about other measures? Sorry to interrupt, Deb Frecklington. What about other measures? The debate is on for young and old around the country now. Now, you know, I don't want to go too hard on this because the measures have worked. They've given our country a really good chance to control this. But that sort of language we saw from Daniel Andrews where he's saying, you know, play golf could cost someone their life or whatever. Isn't it time for us now to talk seriously about some sensible relaxing? Because it's not only good for people, it's absolutely crucial to get the wheels of the economy moving again, save jobs and livelihoods.
Well, Chris, you'd have a great deal of support with that in Queensland, particularly when you hear that we haven't had any new cases overnight. Certainly the language around golf isn't the issue here in Queensland because you can still play golf here. However, people do want to know when their lives are going to come back again. And I've said from the beginning, I don't want to play politics with this. It's not a time for politics. However, common sense has to come to the fore. And that's exactly why I'm calling on the Premier. Give us the health advice that says that the measures that are in place in Queensland need to be here. I mean, this is a Premier who has taken it upon herself as well, without any medical advice, to cancel Parliament. I think we've got 1 day of Parliament this coming week. But there are other measures where people who have got, they've lost their livelihoods because their businesses have had to close. And like you rightfully say, Chris, we understand these measures need to be taken. But we also need a bit of common sense, and that's why I'm calling for a bit of grown-up talk here from the Premier of Queensland. Start treating us like adults. If there is medical advice that says things like schools should remain shut, well, let's give us that information so we can support you in that decision. But otherwise, let's start having a look at some of these measures.
What about state borders? We've got Tasmania, Western Australia, South Australia and Queensland all shutting themselves off to other Australians, presumably from these horrible states of New South Wales and Victoria. Is it time to relax those?
Well, Chris, again, I say we need to get the medical advice that tells us that our borders should remain shut. One thing I will say is that as all of these restrictions come off, we are going to have to start looking at what we're going to do to support the tourism industry here in Queensland. Now, we know our international borders will be shut for some time, so we're going to have to concentrate on that domestic tourism market, and I can tell you I'll be making a massive push to ensure that the Premier of Queensland opens up our borders as soon as possible to make sure that all of those Victorians and New South Wales and people from all over the rest of this great country of ours want to come into Queensland and spend their time here, because we will need every dollar that they've got to spend in this great state of ours, because I can tell you, Chris, people are really hurting up here. So if the Premier's got medical advice to say that those borders can be opened or some of the measures relaxed, well, then let's have a look at it.
Speaking of dollars, we've ended up somehow in the middle of this economic and health crisis. We've got something of a bidding war breaking out between Queensland and New South Wales over the headquarters for Virgin Airlines, which is struggling for survival, obviously. That's a bit ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, look, in relation to this, what I want to see is the full details of what Queensland and the Queensland government has offered to Virgin. I mean, let's go back to basics here. This is a company that is effectively owned by international organisations. So what has the Queensland government offered them? We need to see the jobs stay in Queensland. If any money is being offered to this company, of course we need two airlines. We especially need it for our domestic tourism and to make sure that people are travelling all through Queensland. We do need those two airlines to remain in play. However, we also need to make sure that if any money is being offered by the state government at this time, $200 million, what's it going to? Is it going to protect Queensland jobs? It must keep the headquarters here. It's got to keep those regional airfares affordable. And like I keep saying, it's got to have jobs for Queensland, because, Chris, this has created a great deal of controversy. I know there's a huge number, hundreds of Queensland companies who employ thousands of Queensland workers who are right now struggling to stay alive, struggling to keep their doors open and struggling to make sure that they're going to have employees at the end of all this. And it's only thanks to the Morrison government with the massive packages that they've been offering. So, look, it's a controversial issue, but of course, if Queensland government is offering these sort of dollars to a big company like this, we want to see the details.
Deb Frecklington, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.